Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm going to be checking out the Hobbymate Asteroid 3. I'm really excited about this one because first of all, this is the 6S edition, and in my Cine X140 HV video there were a lot of comments saying that 6S is overkill for 3-inch, and that's just not true, although it certainly was true for the Cine, but that's because they didn't use the right ESCs. And I think anybody that thinks 6S on a 3-inch is overkill aren't understanding that it's not to get more power and speed out of the model. It's exactly the same reason they do 6S on 5-inch, and that is to reduce the kV of the motors so that when you add more voltage, the motors spin at the same RPM as they would on a 4S voltage. But because the voltage has gone up on 6S, the current draw goes down, so you get less voltage sag. Now, racers want less voltage sag so that they don't have to back off the throttle at the end of a race, because on 4S, if the Lipo voltage drops too low, then the model can fall out of the sky and you can't complete the race. Whereas on 6S, because there's less voltage sag, you can stay on the throttle all the way to the end. That's not to say that you are going to get more flight time out of a 6S Lipo, and this is what bothers me the most when people say, I've gone to 6S because it gives me more flight time. If you are getting more flight time out of your 6S Lipo than you were your 4S, then you can't be using a watt-hour equivalent 6S Lipo. For example, I've seen this all the time. Someone with a 5-inch model running a 1300 milliamp 4S switching to a 1050 milliamp 6S. A 1050 6S is the watt-hour equivalent of a 1550 milliamp 4S, or 1575 milliamp if you want to be mathematically accurate. So sorry, but that is why you are getting longer flight times, not because you have switched to 6S. Anyways, I digress, because I think 6S is an even more important switch on these powerful 3-inch racers than a 5-inch model, and here is why. A 5-inch racer can be made super light these days thanks to the advancement of these small stacks and naked bottom motors with hollow shafts, along with micro or nano cameras, has made the 5-inch models really lightweight. You can get a 4S 5-inch racer down to 200 to maybe 220 grams without its Lipo. And there was a time when it was a struggle to get it below 300 grams. Therefore, when you add, say, a fully charged 1550 milliamp 4S to it and go full throttle, your voltage will stay safely in the 15s. Now, that is not the case with a powerful 3-inch model. First of all, most are trying to stay under 250 grams, including the Lipo, to avoid this new registration that's coming into place. And anybody who owns a powerful 3-inch model will tell you that they have a faster top end than a 5-inch, they accelerate quicker, they stop quicker, and they turn quicker. And I've been trying to tell racers who fly 5-inch, just try a 3-inch model, because I think they would absolutely kill a 5-inch model on a racetrack. But I'm not a racer, so what do I know? So if I take the fastest 3-inch bind and fly model that I have ever recorded, the Skyzone S140, which they sadly don't make anymore, and stick a fully charged 850 milliamp 4S Lipo on it and give it full throttle, its voltage can drop to as low as 12 volts immediately. And take it from me, as someone who speed tests all these models, it kills the 4S Lipos very quickly. And before considering 6S, I thought, well, what if I stick a 1000 milliamp 4S Lipo and use an XT60, maybe that will help with the voltage sag. Well, I did exactly that with the Cine TS130, and with an 850 milliamp 4S it recorded a top speed of 108 miles per hour, which is pretty fast. But with a 1000 milliamp 4S, it recorded 98 mile per hour. Now, you can argue that this is also really fast. However, on its first punch, the Lipo's voltage still dropped below 14 volts, which is the voltage that you would want to be landing at. And at the same time, it sent the model over 250 grams. So for these power-hungry 3-inch models, I think 6S is exactly what they need. Anyways, I have the 4S version of the Asteroid 3, so when I review it, hopefully we can see the difference between 4S and 6S. It's also a common misconception that 6S LiPos are heavier than 4S LiPos, and again, if the watt-hour equivalent is the same, then the weight is the same. So the 550 milliamp GMB LiPo is equivalent to a 4S 850 milliamp LiPo, and it's only 1 gram heavier than the 4S. I also want to point out that if you have a light 3-inch model, such as the Signet CX3, or anything using an 11 or 12 stator motor, then I don't think 6S is beneficial, because those models are often lighter and don't pull as many amps, so you don't get the dangerously low voltage sag when you go up on the throttle. However, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point a motor is released with a very low kV that can also handle 6S, but we'd need a LiPo that is smaller for those lighter models. It's really for the 14 and 15 stator motor in conjunction with the most powerful 3-inch props, which are, at the making of this video, the Gemfan Flash 3052. Anyways, that was a huge rant about 6S. So, onto the Asteroid 3. As I mentioned earlier, it's made by Hobbymate and available to buy from Hobbycool. And I think Hobbymate are a really underrated brand. I reviewed their 5-inch Comet and Meteor models, and they are such good value for money, using top-end components but selling them at ridiculously low prices, and the Asteroid 3 is no exception. You can buy it as a kit for $139, which is mind-blowing, or you can get it pre-built with an FrSky receiver for $169, which I also think is a bargain, and here's why. With a 550 milliamp GMB 6S LiPo, it weighs 250 grams on the nose. The motors are really high quality. They are Hobbymate branded, but I think they are a RC InPower rebrand. So it's a premium motor with a naked bottom. It's using a C-clip to hold the bell in place. However, I think this is the case for all motors of this size because a hex screw would be too big for the shaft. The same goes for the shaft not being hollow. The motors are a 1505 2900 kV brushless motor, and what's exciting about that is in the 4S world we are seeing 4100 kV and 4300 kV on this stator size. But 2900 kV on a 6S is the equivalent of a 4350 kV on a 4S, which doesn't sound like a lot more. However, kV is the RPM of a motor if 1 volt is added to it. So the 4S version will be running at 72,240 RPM, but the 6S version will be running at 73,080 RPM. So the 6S version already has a slight advantage. There is one concern though. The fastest 3-inch model that I have ever recorded had a 1506 stator motor, not 1505. And usually the taller stator gives a higher top end speed. So the lower stator height is what could make this model not the fastest. I think the stator height also provides more torque. So even though these motors are a high kV, kV is measured without load. So if these motors don't have enough torque to reach the high RPMs, then the kV won't mean too much. So we will have to see. Now, I should say that there have been a few corners cut to get the cost down with these models. For example, they don't come with any props, so I'll be using the Gemfan Flash 3052 of course, and it doesn't come with a battery strap. There's also nothing set up in Betaflight, however there is a manual you can download on their website, but all they have done is built it for you, and then it's over to you to choose the props that you want and to set up Betaflight yourself. So if you're not accustomed to Betaflight, this guy is not for you. So I've added a HLRC battery strap and also a silicone mat to stop the battery from slipping. So next, let's talk about the frame. It's a stretched X to the extreme that the props are very close together at the front and the back, making it a pure racer. The idea is that the turbulent air doesn't reach the back props because at the angle that it will be flying at, the turbulent air will miss the back propellers. It's also got individual arms rather than a unibody, which does send the weight up slightly, but it also means that if you break an arm, you can replace it. The arms are also very thick and the carbon has been cut properly, so there is no flex whatsoever. Without a battery it weighs 142 grams, and with a battery, as I mentioned earlier, it weighs exactly 250 grams. This company knows what is going on in the world, which I like. The main guts is the iFlight Success Mini F4 V2 flight tower, and this stack is $80 on its own, so they really can't be making huge margins on this guy. So we have a 20x20 35 amp 32-bit D-Shot 1200 4-in-1 ESC, which of course supports up to 6S via an XT30 connector. It doesn't do ESC telemetry, but it does have a built-in current meter along with a Rubicon low ESR capacitor. It's only rated to 35 volts, but spoiler alert, there is enough filtering on the ESC to cope with 6S. The website mentions that the capacitor is a Panasonic brand and not Rubicon, but either of those brands are fine. Then above the ESCs we have an F4 flight controller flashed with stock Betaflight 4 with 3 UARTs and Betaflight on-screen display, and everything is also soft mounted. Above that we have a switching VTX via the tramp protocol, or a button, but the button's quite difficult to get to. It switches from pit mode to 25 milliwatt all the way up to 500 milliwatt, and it's using an MMCX connector and a linear antenna, which is housed nicely in this 3D printed mount. Then above the VTX we have another 3D printed part, which is the receiver cable tied to it. And I was confused when I first saw this receiver because it's green and it's got a JST connector like an RXSR, but the bind button is in a different place and the antennas are different colors than a FR Sky receiver. Anyways, I finally figured out that it's Hobbymate's own FR Sky receiver, which is based off the XSR, but they have made it smaller. It's also flashed with the FCC version of the firmware, so be aware of that. Now, because it's based off the XSR, it has S-port for telemetry, but it's inverted S-port. They have soldered it up to a spare UART on the flight controller, but telemetry isn't going to work because on F4 boards, the spare UARTs are uninverted. And even though they've connected it up, they have mentioned on the website that telemetry isn't going to work. I did wonder, as it's based off the XSR, whether we could do a Project Blue Falcon trick. Rest in peace, Project Blue Falcon. He made a video showing that you could solder wires to some components on the XSR to get uninverted telemetry and S-bus. So that may be possible on this guy, but all I use telemetry for is the RSSI, and it's going to output that back to the transmitter anyways, so I can set that up on channel 8. So I'm not too bothered about that because it doesn't let you do anything that you can't do through the on-screen display. And S-port actually takes up a lot of resources in terms of the flight controller's processor. But this receiver is like $16 or something, which is crazy cheap compared to the RXSR and the XSR. So I will link you guys to that in the description if you're interested. The antennas also came pre-installed on the arms, which I'm a huge fan of. Then lastly, we have the camera, which is the Cadex EOS 2, which isn't the best camera out there, but certainly not the worst, and will have helped to get the weight down of this model. Before I get onto the flight, there is something that I want to mention. So earlier in the video, I said that this flight controller is flashed with Betaflight version 4. And I couldn't get it flying nicely at all on Betaflight 4. It was doing these weird twitches. It almost looked like it was a filter problem, but I went through all of the filter settings, and I even followed the community settings on GitHub, and when I tried those, the copter just flew straight to the sky. So I then tried Betaflight version 4.03, which is the latest version at the making of this video, and it was doing the same thing. So I decided to roll back to Betaflight version 3.55 because I've got a lot of 3-inch models running Betaflight version 3.55, and that just fixed the problem. So this Betaflight 4 thing, it isn't just specific to this model. I've had the same problems with other 3-inch models. There are community settings on GitHub, as I say, for 15 stator and 14 stator motors, but that just didn't work for me. So these are the PIDs that I went with for Betaflight version 3.55. I've got the iTerm Relax on for the roll, pitch and the yaw axis, and I've got the type as gyro. I've got the anti-gravity set to smooth, but I bumped it to 13 because I was getting the nose bobbing on the throttle, but that sorted that problem out there. I've also got TPA as 0.5 as well. If you don't do that, then you will get oscillations as you go up on the throttle. So that's throttle PID attenuation. So it reduces the PIDs as you go up on the throttle. That was very important, and I changed it to 1500. And there's just one other thing that I need to mention as well. It's regarding the power and battery. In order for the current meter to be accurate, you need to set the scaling to 100 and the offset to 20. So I've already posted this flight on my channel because I was just so excited to show you guys the results, but now I'm going to commentate over the top of it. So let's check out what the first speed run brings. So that's 110 mile per hour, and the voltage just dropping below 21.4 volts, but only just slightly. If this was a 4S, it would have dropped into the 13s, into the 12s, and you'd be destroying the battery. So we are not exempt from voltage sag, but it's less. And look at that, 112 mile per hour. We have matched the speed of the Skyzone S140, and I actually thought it would go quicker than that. And we are a flat, calm day here. There's no wind in either direction. So I think 112 mile per hour is actually the limit of these propellers and not the components. Let's go for another speed run here, and we've got 112 mile per hour again, and this is why I'm saying 6S is important for 3-inch consistency. Anyways, I'm letting the battery recover a bit here, so you can see I'm doing some snappy maneuvers, and I've got a pretty nice tune out of it. You could see the sun there looking like Nibiru. It's like blacked out. So yeah, what I have to do is I have to do these speed runs sort of at dusk so that the dog walkers aren't around anymore, and it's safe because, you know, we are at 250 grams, but going 112 mile per hour, you know, you would not want that hitting anybody. Anyways, as you can see, it got a nice tune here, flying really nice and smooth. And yeah, I was really impressed with that. So let's see what speed we get this time. 112 mile per hour again. So the Skyzone S140, it only reached 112 mile per hour once anytime I did a flight with it. So it kind of had to ramp up on the 4S. It would start off at 108 mile per hour, then 109, 111, 112, and then that was it. With 6S, it is consistent. So we're getting towards the end of the battery here, still 108 mile per hour, you know. So yeah, it is tailing off now, but that's still very fast. And up until now, it's been very consistent. Also, check out the current meter. We are at 525 milliamp. Really, I should be thinking about landing at this point, but I carry on because, you know, the battery is recovering. But yeah, look, 21.3. Yeah, I should be landing there, and we've gone over 550 milliamp on the current meter. But let's just see what speed it does, even at the end of its battery. 107 mile per hour. So I'll put links in the description if you wish to get one of these. I thoroughly recommend it, and as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.